Welcome to the Health King's Court. Ancient wisdom, modern health. The realest health podcast in the world. We're here to have the conversations you need to hear to live a healthier, more fulfilled life. Physical health, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, and everything in between. We've been disconnected from reality, from nature, and from truth itself. And far too many people are suffering. But it doesn't have to be this way. On this show, we're shining light where it's darkest, exposing the lies fed to us by mainstream institutions, and finding truth as best we can. It's time to break the cycles of unhealthiness that have trapped society for far too long and set humanity free. Change happens from the ground up, starting with people just like me and just like you, healing our minds, our bodies, and our souls. There's plenty to talk about, so let's get to today's episode. Welcome to another episode of the Health King's Court, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Health. I am very excited about today's guest. He is the founder of the Built From Pain Network. It's a men's self-development group. He's also a licensed real estate agent in New York and New Jersey with a $10 million real estate portfolio. Currently, his mission is to inspire more men to strive towards excellence in every aspect of their lives with zero limitations. He wants to grow his real estate empire through acquiring more commercial real estate property and raising more capital. And he continues to grow his clientele in his real estate agent business in New York and New Jersey. That is the one and only, maybe not the one and only, but the best, Jose Rodriguez.
Hey, what's up, brother? Thank you for having me on. Zach, it's always good to be here. So I'm happy to get this show started and answer any questions, dive into any stories and any experiences. I'm ready, brother. Let's do this.
Let's get it. Like I said at the beginning, very authentically, I'm super excited because you, my friend, as I have shared with you before, to me are a shining light and example of what I believe young men should strive to be. How old are you? Remind us.
I'm 25.
25 years old, and this guy is running a $10 million real estate portfolio, has a mind of iron, a body to match, and is very, very impressive as an individual. And I'm so excited to dive into what has made the man that you are today. So let's get started with kind of who that man is today. When you wake up, what's your default philosophy and mentality and mode with which you approach the day? What's going on in your mind?
Well, what I could say to you is every year that goes by, we all have certain experiences through our lives that could change our routine, right? So I like to start off even before I got into this position that I'm in today, right? Like when I was 18, just got my real estate license, just was tapping into personal development and business and really understanding who I am as a man. I remember waking up and thinking how much more there was for me to accomplish that day, right? I remember thinking there are so many things that have to get done, right? And I was never the type of person that just lingered in bed, stayed in there, and just thought to himself like, well, there's nothing for me to do. No, I always saw the world with a sense of duty, right? With a sense of urgency, with a sense that there's a lot for me to do. And there's a lot of people that are counting on me to do those things. Despite of their mindset, their mentality, their responsibility, their view of the world, I always saw myself as somebody that had to have that responsibility and that sense of duty, despite of how anybody felt, and go after it every single day. Still to this day, being 25, I still feel like that, right? And it was funny because I before the podcast, brother, I have a bunch of journals next to me, and I was just reading my literature as to when I used to wake up back in those days. I used to wake up and write a lot, right? And I have these journals next to me, and I was rereading some of the literature that I wrote, and I can see the linear mindset and the linear vision that taps into even how I think today and how I move today. So to just keep it brief and simple, brother, it's all about mindset. It's all about understanding that today's a new day and that's going to come with new challenges. However, if you have a specific way of viewing life in a specific mindset, which I'm sure we'll get into, there's always a specific system where you can overcome these adversities and always come out on top, because it's about how you respond to the situation and not so much about getting anxious about what's coming. So that's it, bro. That's my day to day, man. I just wake up and go after it, bro. That's it.
Yeah. And a key point that you said drives you going after it is that sense of duty. Where did that come from? Like, where did that duty get instilled within you? And who is that duty to? Is it to yourself, your family, to God, to the world? You know, let's dive into that duty. What drives that?
Of course, brother. So there's a array of things that I see when you ask me this question, brother. The first thing that I'll say is, of course, going to be my family, right? I see the duty to my family because I grew up in a very poor household, you could say, back in the Dominican Republic, right? And I only saw my father like maybe once a year, right? And he was out here in the United States working to get his family over here, right? My mother was raising myself and my two brothers. And then they say it takes a village to raise a kid, right? So I was also surrounded by my cousins, friends, aunts, uncles. So I never felt like I was alone as a kid. I always felt loved, even in dangerous environments, because we didn't necessarily live in the safest neighborhoods, right? My mom would tell me that there's a carnival going outside, and meanwhile, there's actually a shootout happening. You know what I mean? So that's like the protective nature of a mother, of course. And that's, I appreciate the love that I felt and the love that I was raised with. Now, fast forward, brother, when I came to this country as a kid, I was making sense out of things, but it wasn't until the time that I was maybe around 18, 19, 20, 21, around that time range, where I started to put things into perspective and really become grateful for the things that my family has done for me, my father specifically, because he was working his ass off. And we understand a lot as men, we have to do the work and not look for that validation. It's not about that validation. It's about doing what we have to do, doing our duty and what we're responsible for what we have to do, and not necessarily worry so much about the external things that may or may not come, because it's what we're supposed to do, right? So I would just envision all the pain, all the suffering, and all the things that my father went through to get his family to this country of opportunity, right? And for me now to sit here in this beautiful real estate, right, with this beautiful opportunity that I had to work my ass off, it was a sense of duty to my family, because I believe that this is the opportunity that they gave me, right? If it wasn't for them, and even let me not even go there yet. They gave me this opportunity. So who would I be to them? How grateful would I demonstrate I actually am for the opportunity if I didn't necessarily take advantage of it? You see what I'm saying? So I felt that sense of duty to my family first. And then also, another thing that I'll say that actually could sometimes conflict between the two, which is interesting, is also a sense of duty to my truth, right? Because a lot of the times we can grow up with people around us that love us and care us and set certain expectations for us through love and care, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's how we have to go about it. Case in point, my mother wanted me to go to college and wanted me to get a degree, wanted me to get married, wanted me to do all these things that she maybe saw that was the imprint of success, right? And for me, I didn't see it that way. So would I be my true self if I stayed incarcerated in the visions and in the expectations, even of my family, friends, people around me? How would that add up to my story? Because we're all here to also create our story. So I said, no, they disagreed with me on that. However, now they come into my property and they see everything that I've been able to do, and they don't say a word. They're just proud of me, right? And that also comes to a certain masculine aspect of life where you have to be able to fly out of that nest and be able to create your life, create your story, and then inspire everybody that's around you, which is where I'm at right now in this pivotal moment of my life. So those are the two main things that come to mind. And also, when I say truth, I always relate truth as to God as well, because I do believe that that's what God would want us to do, right? To live by our truth and to be able to inspire ourselves to be outspoken and to be all right with being tested by the world. So that's another, you can say, mission and conquest that I've been on and I'm still on day after day after day. So it's a pretty exciting life, you could say, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the excitement obviously exudes, it's certainly no secret and it's authentic coming from you. It's certainly very authentic. To back up a little bit, I always love just getting to origin stories, right? And I don't have the experience that you had of having a father that then went and worked and then came around only so often. So I want to know what that was like. What did it feel like when he did come around, when he was able to make it? Was it like Superman just walked in the door, like, wow, this guy's out here conquering the world, bringing it back to us? Like, what were those moments like? Do you remember what that felt like?
Yeah, briefly, I will say that even though he was here, I would always have a conversation with him over the phone, consistently. I can't make out exactly what those conversations would be like. There's a saying, right? You will always remember how you felt and not necessarily what was said, right? So I remember that I never felt alone. I never felt like he abandoned us. I just understood that he was working. He was doing what he was supposed to be doing. Somehow I understood that as a kid. And I never felt alone. And maybe that was something that he did very well on his part, that he never made his family feel like he was abandoned. And also, even with my mother was very supportive, even through times where maybe they had a specific disagreement. She understood that he was the man. He was working on getting us and in a better situation and putting us and inspiring a better opportunity upon his family. So I never felt alone, brother. I always felt cared for. I always felt loved. It's more about how certain people go about it, right? Like I could say in a different family or in a different household, let's say, if the mother and father were never on the same page, always disagreeing, she was always going behind his back and doing things that, let's say, would conflict with the family, that would be a completely different experience. But I never felt like that was my experience because even still to this day, my parents are still together, right? So I felt like I was really never alone, bro. I always felt like I was loved by my family, and I had a great childhood, brother. That's the best way that I could describe it.
That's so beautiful, man. It's so beautiful because it's unfortunately all too rare, right? It's amazing what a stable, loving, gendered, traditional, proper household can really mold a young man into and allow a young man to mold himself into. What about the role of your brothers? You are, if I recall correctly, the youngest of three. Is that correct? And
Yeah.
what was the role of your brothers, and especially older brothers, in growing up, especially when your father wasn't necessarily present in the household itself? Were they always kind of like mini fathers in your eyes, or were they more peers, or what was their?
I was always competing, man. I was that younger brother that wanted to be better than both of them. That's just who I was. Like we would always fight, right? We always watched like, wrestling sports and stuff like that on the TV. And every time we would always fight, bro. And it's funny because I did get into fights in school as well as a kid. But it was like I had like two sides of me, right? Because I would be getting into fights as a kid, but then I would always go to church afterwards with my family. So it was interesting. So in the beginning, I guess that I did get myself into a little bit of trouble. Perhaps maybe certain things did impact me a certain way, right? But I would say that I never, again, like I never felt alone. And with my brothers, it was always a competition. So I felt like perhaps that helped me elevate and always want better for myself, right? Always challenge myself, always. And that's another thing too. Like if you surround yourself with a weak competition, you're always going to measure up to weak people, right? You're always going to measure up to people that are not necessarily going to challenge you. But because I was the youngest brother, I would always measure myself up to what my oldest brother was doing. And I always wanted to be like him to a degree, right? So anytime that I was in a specific situation, I would always do my best to lead with my heart and to be as brave as possible, even as a kid, right? Because I felt like I didn't want to be made fun of by my brothers. I didn't want to show weakness. That's how it was like for me growing up with my two brothers, right? So that's my experience, bro.
It's interesting. You used a word earlier to describe your progress, at least an observation of the writing materials that you had mentioned, you use the word linear. Would you say that your life path has always been that way? Has always been kind of a linear ascent from the time that you were young? Or was it kind of all like in different directions? Did you go through different iterations of yourself? Or have
Yeah.
you always been this like evolving on the same path of becoming this person?
No, absolutely not, man. I mean, you could say philosophically, yes, because oh well, we make mistakes, we learn from them, and then we adapt. However, to directly answer your question, no, bro, no. We all go through certain difficulties and certain adversities that mold us into the individual that we are today. And I remember there was a specific time in my life where when we came to this country, and I was around the age of, you can say, 14 to 17, even tapping into 18, right? On those early days, I was on the street doing things that like you would never expect Jose to do these days, right? Like I was getting in trouble, violence, fights, things like that, just surrounding myself with, you could say, not necessarily the best crowd. And I remember a specific time where my mother would look out the window and she would just see the environment that I was around. And sometimes it would bring her to tears, right? And I remember that specific day, and I didn't like that, right? So I think that moment, it was moments like that that allowed me to understand that there was something that I wasn't doing that was necessarily right, because as I was looking at my family and the way that they were raised, and even what my brothers were doing, because they didn't know the things that I was into, right? It reminded me a lot of, like, these aren't my values, right? There's something different happening here, and I was forced almost to just look at the differences in regards to lifestyle and the paths, right? Like if I'm looking at a chessboard and I'm looking 4, 5, 6 moves ahead, I would always analyze, where is this going to lead me to, right? So in a specific point of my life, I was selling weed in the streets, and I remember getting myself into conflicting environments and conflicting, you could say, things that would happen, right? And it was to the point where I was thinking, well, I got to buy some protection. I got to make sure that, I keep myself safe. I was very paranoid, bro. I was very paranoid. I was scared. It wasn't necessarily the best moment in my life. And I remember being on a date with a girl at the time, and it was her birthday, and I had to leave that day early because there was certain people that were threatening my friends at the time, right? That wanted to steal what we had, right? And I had to drive all the way back from New Jersey all the way back to New York, drop her off, and then hang out with the boys, see what's going on. And I just remember being around that environment, brother. And that's when I started to get the thoughts of the advancing, you could say, path into hell. I would call it, right? Because that path was only going to lead me into jail or death. Those are the only two outcomes of that specific path. And I'm glad that I saw that earlier on. That's when I was about 17 to 18. And by the time I turned 18, my brother was already kind of hooking me up with a specific job. And once he did that, that really allowed me to rebound and set my life up straight. I remember the last day that I was in that specific environment, where I had a big smile on my face, right? And they were asking me, like, "Oh, like, why are you so happy?" And I just remember telling them, "Well, I'm so happy because this is my last day doing this shit. I got a real job and I'm out of here." I just remember that specific moment. And ever since then, bro, I just kept walking forth with my head held high and my chest out, and never looked back, bro. Never looked back. Isolated myself for a long time and just worked, man.
That's beautiful because it's, to put it plainly, an example of a, at the time, troubled young man on a dark path whose loving, supporting family, both in the terms of your mother and your brother, snapped you out of that. And so that's amazing. That's beautiful that they were able to be there for you and provide not only that accountability in the sense that your mother was like, "What are you doing? I don't like this," but also your brother was able to give you that alternative and that helping hand. That's amazing. And you
Yeah, bro.
mentioned,
What I would like to say too is that this is why it's important for specifically young men to have role models, right? Because those are my role models, like I was looking at, for example, like my oldest brother, he already had his first 2 family real estate property, right? And I was just looking at the role models that I had and the differences between the two environments. And I think that it's very important for specifically young men to have these point of references in their mind, because if they don't, it's much more easier for them to get swayed towards that dark path and be a little bit more difficult to see a way out.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm curious, what brought you there in the first place? Right? Because you said your brothers didn't necessarily get involved in those types of activities. What did kind of hook you into that?
Friends, bro, it was friends, school, bro, because all right, so I'm the youngest. Kevin, he's about 2 to 3 years older than me. And my oldest brother, he's about 6 to 7 years older than me, right? So obviously we were in a different, we were in the similar age bracket, but they were a little bit more ahead. And I would say that they had their own friends. I would hang out with them as well. But there was a specific period of my life where I would mainly hang out with my friends at the time, right? And when I started to basically remove myself from hanging out with my brothers more often and started to hang out with, you could say, this other crowd, I started to adapt certain habits that were a little bit different than what I was used to, right? My mentality was different, almost through osmosis, you could pick up on certain people's bad habits and pick up on a certain way of thinking. And you as a man, if you're going to belong to a specific social circle, now there's also going to be an ego to that. And you're going to also want to represent a specific status in that social circle that may drive you to do certain things that it may be valued in that specific social circle, but not necessarily valued in another environment in your life where you perhaps may be held to different standards, or in now I could say higher standards, right? But at the time, I was young. This is what I wanted to do, to be the cool guy, whether it was to get girls, or whether it was to look better in front of my friends, or whether it was to make money. Whatever it was, I was not necessarily adapting the right values, right? Because we're going to automatically be anchored to our belief systems and our values. And the belief system that I adapted around this environment was very contrary, you could say, to the environment of my family, into their perception, into their goals, and into their values. So that was the main difference, right? And that's why there's a famous quote, right? You are the sum of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. I started surrounding myself with 5 people that weren't necessarily conductive and productive for my life. So that's what ended up happening, bro.
Yeah. And although you've been on different paths in life, some better than others, right? Would you say to your core, you were always that high energy, high achieving, outgoing, confident person? Like you were just in different environments? Like, was that always in there? That fire that you have in you?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Because yes, in a way where I was always very competitive, and no, because I would get myself into certain environments that maybe I wasn't the best at. And sometimes I would be inclined to improve myself. So yes, in that matter as well. Like even if I tapped into a specific environment where maybe I felt right more introverted, and I believe introvert and extrovert is bullshit anyways. And we could talk about that if you want later. I in certain environments where I felt more introverted, you could say, I wanted to become better. I noticed that within myself. I could say that I was very aware, and I always held myself accountable to become a better person in the environments that I wanted to become better at. And that's what I mean by a linear mindset and a linear vision when I read these literatures that I had back from 2017, 2018, 2019 that still connect to the things that I speak about now.
Yeah. Yeah. And so obviously real estate is your primary area of work, and it's what you kind of first dove into when you were looking to get into a career path. Was it simply because your family was already in real estate, or was there something about the industry that really called to you?
Well, my family had a lot to do with it, again, because my oldest brother already had his first property. So by him having his first property, he already was knowledgeable and educated as to what that industry brings and the opportunities within that industry. So that obviously allowed me to be a little bit more biased towards that specific industry and want to learn more about it. And as soon as I figured out that, well, if I can buy a property I can get paid every single month without having to necessarily go to work by just renting out these units and renting out apartments. I saw that as a life hack, almost like, wow, why isn't everybody doing this? Like, I would love to put a $15,000 down payment to this 2-family home, get paid every single month $1,000. By the end of the year, I've already almost made my full down payment, and the property has appreciated in value, which now I can tap into that specific equity, refinance, or take a home equity line of credit and buy another property, or maybe sell it. This makes a lot more sense to me than keeping my money in the bank, especially since I'm more of an aggressive kind of person where I like to just go at it and tackle life. So I saw it as like, well, the way that the rich people think is, well, if I want to drive a Lamborghini, or if I want to drive, a really nice car, then the rich people that are in real estate, what they would do is they would buy a property that is capable of cash flowing them enough money to be able to buy that car. So instead of utilizing their hard-earned money that they work for, you can say, they'll put that money to work for them and then utilize the money that money recruits for them to buy the things and to buy the lifestyle that they actually want. All I have to do is just focus on buying more real estate, buy more property, and continue to multiply my portfolio. So now you could say that I'm an example of that idea, because that's exactly what I've done. And that's exactly what I'm doing. So in the very, very core, in the seed of that idea, I saw the vision, bro. And even to the point where I was still surrounding myself with the friend group that wasn't necessarily a positive influence on me, you could say. And I remember a specific day where I went over to my friend's house, and there was like 4 of us, right? And I sat them down, and he had a board, and I would go over like what an FHA loan is, what house hacking is, what the Burr method is. And I would go through like, this is how you can generate generational wealth. This is how you build equity. Why rent where you can have your tenants pay off this property for you and you could make a lot of money, right? So I would, but they just weren't that interested. So I was, and now 5, 6, 7 years later, a lot of people are hitting me up right about it. And that's unfortunate, because when the opportunity is in front of you, it's really, really beneficial, and it's really impactful if you take advantage to it as soon as you see it. And that's what I did, understanding that my family was already involved in the business.
Yeah. Yep. It's about seizing an opportunity, of course. It's not just about having it be there. You have to take advantage of it. But you said right there that why isn't everyone doing this? But kind of simultaneously, it feels like everybody does want to be a real estate bro. But what's the difference of why people like yourself make it and make it big, and perhaps relatively few people are able to do that?
Yeah, I would say, bro, I'm so big on environment, man. I am so big on environment. And the reason why is because even when I got my real estate license, for example, like, yeah, I had my family with me that, for example, my oldest brother, my middle brother, we would always talk about real estate. I was a part of certain online communities like Bigger Pockets that I would study their podcast, study their life story, study what they're doing and how they're building their portfolio. So I kept this ecosystem around me that just kept feeding me experiences, feeding me information. And that's why, despite of how young you are, the way that you can gain experience, even without gaining those experiences, is to have mentors that are sharing stories with you so that you can learn from their mistakes. So I had a specific job, right? It was a land survey job, right? And what land surveying is basically you locate, that's when you locate what's on the property and where the property is located on a geographical graph, you can say, right? On a map. And I was working with my brother. That's a job that my brother put me onto. And I remember that there were specific times where I would always be on the road or always be on the office, and I didn't necessarily need my ears for anything. So I would just plug in, my Bluetooth headphones, and I would just listen to these podcasts, listen to these experiences, just bombarding myself with all of this education and all of these different experiences. Got a mentor in California. I went to go see him as often as I could. So I would fly to California. It got to a point where at first, it was once a year. Right. So I remember flying there once, and then I remember seeing myself flying there almost every month to go speak to this mentor that I had. Right. And I just surrounded myself with people that also wanted greatness, that also wanted to become successful in that specific field. And I think that the reason why most don't make it is because they have this arrogant approach as to or this entitlement approach as to like, well, I should know how to do it. I'm just gonna go out there and just make something happen. And yeah, you can say that's halfly positive, but the other half is to understand that you don't know what you don't know, right? And by getting yourself around certain people that you may not know how they could even help you, but you know that they're doing well, you may pick up certain things that could actually help you adapt to the situation and become successful in that specific field. So that's what it's been like, bro. And that's the method that I took.
Yeah, I'm glad that you raised that example because it's easy for someone who perhaps doesn't have the healthy, supportive environment in their own family to then sit back and say, ah, well, excuse. I guess I don't have the supportive environment. But even though you did have that, you sought out the external factors as well. So even people that don't have the supportive family unit around them, they, as much as you, can then go and seek those mentors additionally. I want to get into the mentality of a real estate mogul, if you will. What does it feel like to own where people live and own people's places of business? Like, what is that psychological process? Do you ever think about that? Like, you own where these people's lives are. What does that feel like?
Well, it feels good in a sense because I'm capable of housing them. I'm capable of providing them a specific opportunity, especially for people that cannot necessarily afford to buy their home, but they're good people. They have good financial habits. So, it makes me feel happy that I'm able to provide these opportunities and also improve certain communities, right? Because we purchase property that need a lot of work. We go into them, we renovate them, we raise the value of the property. And since we're raising the value of the property, we're also simultaneously raising the value of all the other properties that are around us. So I'm also raising the value of the community. I think that the work that we're doing is actually a very charitable act, right? And I mean that respectfully because it takes a specific amount of grit and in a specific, you can say, tough skin to be able to take on these kind of projects, right? Because it's risky. It's risky. So it feels great, man. And I don't think about that too much, actually. I'm so focused on the mission, so focused on the conquest that intuitively I know that I'm doing the right thing. And I know that I'm not doing anything unethical. So I never really gave it much thought. I feel great about it. And it's something that I plan on continuing to do for the rest of my life, And then in regards to the mentality, do you want to dive into what goes on through my day-to-day mindset as I approach these opportunities?
I was just kind of on a more philosophical level, what it feels like to be a landlord and actually own that property, because it's a very powerful position. You are inherently adopting power, if you will, over other people.
Yeah, it also teaches you, you know what? It also teaches you a lot of standards and having boundaries, right? Because sometimes certain people may have, you can say, certain situations, certain unfortunate situations happening in their life, where you also have to establish a certain, level of boundaries and say, listen, I understand that this is going on in your life. However, you still got to pay the rent. You know what I mean? Like you still have a responsibility. You gave me your word. I'm going to hold you to your word, regardless of what's happening in your life. And I'll tap into that specific mentality even deeper, because some people may look at that as unfair, but I don't see that, because it's not unfair to me when I have to go through certain difficulties in my life and the world doesn't give a fuck, So at the end of the day, I've always been holding myself accountable. Despite of what happens in my personal life, I still have to perform. I go back to that, the first thing that I told you, and it was about sense of duty, right? Despite of what's happening in my life, I still have a duty. I still have a mission, and people are counting on me. I'm counting on me. I gave my word to my family. I gave my word to my landlord, you could say, because I rented an apartment before I lived in this house. I was renting a 1-bedroom apartment, and it was about my own self-image as well. Like, I don't want to come across as a person that is irresponsible, that is not disciplined, that cannot be trusted. So, I mean, listen, if you have a specific hardship going on in your life, like, we could talk about it and perhaps we can work something out depending on what the situation is. However, it teaches you a lot also how to deal with people. Maybe sometimes you could say you can empathize with them, but it also allows you to put boundaries and allow you to learn really when to say no. And that's something that I could say is very beneficial, not just for business, but also for your personal life.
Has there ever been a moment where you did break your standards or boundaries out of a moment of empathy for a scenario? Or do you stand?
For real estate, I mean, I could give you a specific example, right? On the agent side, for example, like sometimes, you're working with certain buyers, right? And they're very, very emotional. They love the house. They want to go see it. Hey, Jose, can you show me this property? And maybe they don't have the pre-approval, or maybe they don't have proof of funds. But sometimes, when I first started in my career, I would get the tendency of like, man, like, I feel bad. I should just go show it to them. But it would be a big waste of time because I would show them the house. They would get all emotional about it. They wouldn't be able to afford it. And now they would feel worse because it feels like I just stripped away this vision that they had. Well, it would have been better if they just lingered in fantasy for a few more months until they could actually afford it. You know what I mean? Until they could actually see what their pre-approval looks like and then start to set the right expectations, right? So a lot of the times you're doing a disservice to yourself, but you're also doing a disservice to them because you're letting them get away with bad habits. And now they think that those bad habits are actually good things that they can continue to exercise. And now you're having this, you can say, ripple effect on society by now valuing these habits and this way of being that is not necessarily constructive to themselves, to myself, and to the world. So a lot of the times you may not feel like, hey, it's tough to say no to this person, but you have to. It's that higher sense of duty. It's that higher sense of standard. And if you're holding yourself to it, you should also hold other people to it as well.
Yeah. Less honesty and less clarity only leads to more chaos. And that can extrapolate out from the real estate example to really all of society and all of life in general. But still on real estate, what do you think of the people, and it seems the growing number of people that have this concept that all landlords are evil people and it's bad? What do you say to those people?
I mean, listen, bro.
Because even on the specific example that you said, you're buying properties, renovating them, that's raising the value, right? People will specifically go at that and say, oh, well, now he's going to raise the price. Now the property tax is going to go up for the people who are already there and they can't afford it. And now rent's going to go up and it's going to be harder for us. And so people will specifically say that the things you said were a good thing and a charity are evil. That's highly dissonant. What do you say to those people?
Yeah, man. Well, in a more profound point of view is survival of the fittest, right? And a lot of people do not want to be held accountable for their own bullshit, right? Maybe they've lived a life where certain things have been given to them and they've always felt the victim to their life and to their reality. So what I would say to them is, sometimes we have to face reality. Sometimes you have to face that, we have a plan, but we may get punched in the face, as Mike Tyson say. And we have to be able to deal with how we're going to respond to that specific situation. If you stay living in a reality where you are not granting yourself control of bettering your life and your situation, you will always be weak and you will never be able to improve yourself and to improve the people that you love and be able to become a role model for them, right? So I've been in a situation where I maybe even had it harder than those people, right? I mean, when I lived in the Dominican Republic, we didn't have hot water to shower with. We would shower outside in the backyard with cold water on a bucket. You know what I mean? That was my life, right? Roaches scattered everywhere. That's where I lived, right? In the Dominican Republic. Now to hear somebody else that is more privileged than me say at that time, you know what I mean? Say something that, oh, like this is evil. I just look at it as pure weakness. And I look at it as, I ask myself the question, how much pain and how much suffering are these people going to need to feel until they decide to actually take responsibility for the course of their life? And that's the only way that I can put it, bro.
Cool. So I'm going to edit this thumbnail and put devil horns on you and say, evil landlord hates everybody. No, I'm kidding.
Go for it.
It's funny. It's a great point that you raise. Even in the hot water example, I was listening to an audio just yesterday and it was talking about how people are so ungrateful for the beautiful life that they live because they just want to compare themselves perhaps to people who currently have it better than them right now, not realizing that if they have both access to hot water and ice, they are living better than a king of years past who had neither. So, it's all in perspective, right? It's all relative, and it's so easy to be ungrateful for what we have around us when there's always people that have less, and there's always something to be grateful for. So
Yeah,
yeah,
bro. I would actually like to tap into a little bit more of that because, a way that you can reinforce this kind of way of thinking is, and again, like I have these journals next to me, right? And this specific one, right, I called it the gratitude journal. So I would wake up every day and I would speak about the things that I would be grateful for, in this journal, right? So I would be grateful for the most simplest things, in life. And there was even times where when I would feel, you can say, quote unquote, comfortable, I would remove the access of my bed and sleep on the floor, right? To teach myself a lesson because I wanted to be able to tap into that beast that didn't have those excuses. I wanted to tap into that beast that had to perform, that had no other option, that had no other chances. And a lot of people, I think, become soft because they feel entitled to this life of luxury and to this life of comfort until it gets very difficult and they have no other option, which really molds the character of the person, right? So sometimes you have to force yourself to be able to influence your own subconscious, whether it's through physical motion, right? Like sleeping on the floor, taking a cold shower, removing certain things of luxury so that you can experience what a simple life actually looks like, or even influencing your subconscious in a way where you're repeating the things that you're grateful to you to continuously remind yourself and to have the array of thoughts that you consistently have every single day around the things that you're grateful for, around the things that you want to focus your vision in. Because a lot of it's our subconscious mind that's continuing to rule our vision, to rule our senses, to rule our thoughts, to rule the way that we move, to rule the way that we speak and how we speak about certain things and how we speak about ourselves. So if I can mechanically implant certain thoughts into my brain, it'll allow me to see the world completely different. And I did that for a really, really long time. It's 2024. I started doing that back in 2018. You know what I mean? So when somebody looks at my mindset and asks me, wow, Jose, you sound like a motivational speaker. That's something I heard recently, right? And wow, Jose, like you have such a positive mindset. And I'm just like, bro, it's not necessarily that I have a positive mindset. It's just that I've molded my mindset into thinking a certain way because it was more productive and conductive to my life and to where I wanted to be 5 to 10 years from now. And I think people should do the same thing. So it's about having that self-discipline.
yeah, it really is. It's about the meta-analysis of where am I, where do I want to go, and how do we bridge that gap, right? How do we develop a plan and how do we realistically execute and implement that plan to get there? But people seem to not even get that far. They're just kind of do existing in world in life, and next thing you know, they're 60 years old, miserable, fat, and have a relationship. Like it's is it really that hard? Like it's hard, right? It takes difficulty, it takes struggle, but is it really that hard to win when you actually try?
Yeah.
It's so interesting. But why do you think so few people, when we look around, are winning at anything in life? What is going on? How are these people? What's going on in society, Jose?
They're afraid of being judged. It always goes back to being afraid of being judged. It always goes back to cultivating a specific ego that they grew an attachment to over the longest periods of their lives, and then having to kill that ego to be able to transform themselves into the person that they genuinely want to be. It's about understanding that you've been identifying to a specific person that is no longer serving you, and you understand that there's certain things that continue to repeat, certain patterns that continue to repeat day after day after day, and you have to be able to zoom out of that, step outside of that pattern for a second and be able to observe it right from a third point of view, and then really be able to see the habits and the challenges that you've avoided. The challenges specifically, like I'll take you back to a specific point of my life where, something that I hear a lot about, successful entrepreneurs is stop chasing girls, stop, doing this, stop doing that. But let me go ahead and be a little bit controversial on this point as a successful young entrepreneur myself. I remember when back in 2019 and 2020, where I wanted to work on my social skills and I wanted to work on my communication and I wanted to work on communicating specifically with women. And I remember I would specifically go out of my way. Sometimes it would be for 30 minutes out of my busy schedule. Sometimes it would be in the evening time in specific venues, whether it was bars, lounges, rooftops. And I would go out and I would communicate, right, with women. I would communicate with the waiters, with the bouncers, with the doormen, with the owners of these venues. And I would specifically test out my own communication because I wanted to be more calibrated in the way that I communicated, right? And even putting myself out there, a lot of the times I would go out by myself and make friends. And then every time I would revisit the specific venue, I would be welcomed with open arms. Somebody always running to me saying, "Oh my God, hi, how's it going?" It was a consistent progression to even how I was able to tap out of my shell, right? From a moment of, you can say, back to that other example that I gave you a few stories ago, where it was like, well, I don't believe in introvert or extrovert. The reason why I don't believe in introvert or extrovert is because I remember I didn't have the experience of going out to, you can say, even bars or lounges. I didn't have that experience, right? But I believe that a man should be able to hold his own and should be able to know how to walk through a variety of different paths in a way that he can also thrive in any environment and adapt to any environment should he find himself in a situation like that. So I would go into these venues, and at first I wouldn't necessarily know what to say. I don't know when to approach. I wouldn't know what the proper timing is. I wouldn't know how I'm going to tell this joke to be able to break the ice. And I had to go out there, fail, be judged, be laughed at, and learn, and then little by little, I was more calibrated in my communication. My body language was more anchored to be able to communicate certain things in and of itself, where it allowed me to have a more productive conversation with the person. And I just continued to build on this skill set to the point where now I can communicate with somebody and they would feel 100% comfortable when they're having a conversation with me because I wouldn't come off threatening. Whereas in the beginning, I maybe possibly would, because I would walk up into the environment, maybe without a smile, right? Maybe too confrontational because I would maybe stand right in front of them. Perhaps I was invading in their own privacy and standing too close to them. So these are little subtle things that allow you to also equip yourself with some consideration when you're having a conversation with other people, even to the fact of like, well, I've been speaking too long. Like, all right, let me let Zach speak, because I'm taking up the whole stage, just becoming more aware as a whole and tapping into these uncomfortable and challenging situations allow you to do that. And when you do that consistently, you're capable of translating how you respond to uncomfortable and challenging situations to anything else that you do in life, whether it's business, women, fitness, anything that you could possibly think of.
Yeah, you just got to do the things, right? Like you said, people have a lack of a meta-analysis of themselves and what's going on, and people have a fear of putting themselves in scenarios that they could even then use to meta-analyze and then kind of calibrate themselves. It's that fear of being judged and the acting or non-acting based on that fear of being judged that changes everything. That makes all the difference, because it's the acting or inacting on it, because everybody has it, right? Unless you're a cold psychopath, you do care a bit about what people think, right? It's a natural human experience and a mentality, or a innate mentality, to care to a degree what people think. But it's do we act on it, and do we act on that fear by cowering away or shying away, or do we overcome that fear by, like you said, putting ourselves in examples and figuring it out? That makes all the difference.
Some people are the effects of the environment. Other people are the causes of the environment, right? So that's the main difference, right? Yeah. Like for me, I always wanted to come from cause instead of being the effect of what everybody else is doing.
Yep, absolutely. It's so funny, when you said the fear of being judged, the first thing I thought of was, so I recently attended a event that Jose put on at his mansion, and in it, we talked about business and he talked about his story as well. And he played a video from, I don't know how many years ago, when he was first getting started in real estate. And all I could think of when I was watching that video, because this was before he made it, this was before he had the credentials, the portfolio, the success to back it up. All I could think of is other people seeing that back then and thinking this kid's full of fucking shit, because there's so many kids out there making those videos and doing those same things and talking this big game. And I just smiled because here's an example of someone who made it. They made it the reality. They spoke it and worked it into existence. But I imagine that doing videos like that was pivotal in perhaps spurring you on to then make it the reality. And if you had that fear of being judged back then and didn't put that out there and put yourself out there like that, perhaps we wouldn't be sitting here today with yourself having the success that you had. So, do you have any thoughts on that? Like,
Yeah, bro. I mean, absolutely. And there was even shows that I had with one of my friends, Ronnie, right? And it would be the Jose and Ronnie talk show. And that would be like every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. And we would go live on Instagram. We'd have like 15, 20 people, watching the live. It wasn't a lot of people, but it wasn't necessarily so much about the people that were watching. Yes, of course, we were providing value and extrapolating from our experiences and sharing with the world. Hey, this is what's been working with my prospecting. This is what's been working with my communication and with my interactions and dialogues to build trust, and then to be able to sell myself as a businessman, you could say, right? Or even personal stories. And we would test ourselves in how we share these stories, right? And we would go back and rewatch these videos. And number one, yes, it was a way of challenging ourselves because it would be impromptu, right? We would just go live. There was no script. Sometimes there wasn't even a topic. We would just go live and we would just start talking about it, about whatever it is that's going on in our current life. And then we would extract from certain experiences that we've had perhaps in that week and talk about those things that have happened and how one can learn from those experiences. Even as simple experience of sitting in traffic and being completely calm, right? And we would extract certain stories and certain messages and certain values from these experiences and these stories, and we would share it, right? So a lot of people, you can say, are uncomfortable getting on camera. Oh, I don't like how I look. I don't like how I sound. I don't think people are going to like what I'm saying, this and that. They have all of these limiting beliefs about themselves, right? And this distorted self-image, and challenge that. That's all I would say to you, right? If you're watching this right now and you don't think for whatever reason that you're good enough, or you don't think that nobody wants to listen to you, I highly recommend that you challenge yourself and go out there and grab that seat at the table and just start being who the fuck you are, right? And allow the world to respond to you, and take that response and take that feedback as fuel to be able to better yourself in life. And yes, while making those videos, I had a lot of haters. I had a lot of people that were talking shit. However, even still to this day, Zach, there's still haters. I make a video today, right, talking about real estate outside of my 2 beautiful properties, right, on 4 acres. This house is a 7-bedroom. That the next one is, I mean, it's just, you've seen the houses, bro. Like it's beautiful properties. And I'm not the kind of guy that's going to brag about these material things, but it is a staple to my success, right? Because I had to earn this specific lifestyle. And there would still be somebody, oh, the houses are rented. Oh, like just talking shit, bro. And you know what? It's all right, because at the end of the day, there's certain people that are going to gravitate towards you, and there are certain people that are not. And you work with the people that gravitate towards you, and you cultivate a community that continue to grow and feed itself with more positivity. And then everybody else, don't even pay attention to them. Allow them to just be who they are, because the only way that good will only be around, the only way that good will ever be around, is if there's evil to test it, right? And that's the experience that I always face every single day when I wake up, that I know I'm going to be tested on my values. I know that I'm going to be tested on my principles. I know that I'm going to be tested and questioned on the things that I say. And you know what? I'm ready for it.
Do you recall the last time that perhaps you didn't do so well on one of those tests? Something that you struggled with recently?
I gotta think about it, bro. I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm thinking about it. And I don't want to sit here and sound like this arrogant guy that always does well, but it's just not, it's maybe the reason why I can't necessarily think about it is because it's not a frame of mind. I don't think like that. Even if something weren't to necessarily go my way or to the way that I perhaps perceived it to go, I would take it as a learning experience, and I wouldn't necessarily invest too much thought in it. I would just take what I learned from it and just progress. I don't dwell on negativity or things that don't necessarily go my way. I just allow it to teach me something and I just keep moving forward. Like seriously, bro, I'm being 100% honest with you and congruent with you. That is how I view life. I've been in certain situations, let's say, where man, like even situations where have been difficult for some people, right? Like even in situations where I've lost certain people in my life and I would have to be the one that would be strong, and not that I'm the only one that has to be strong, but in a way where like I would never look at it as like it happened, like what can we do? Right? It's hard to say because there's a lot of people that could be very emotionally consumed at the moment, right? But at the same time, my frame of mind immediately goes to the positive things that I can take from the experience and allow myself to just move forward with prosperity, right? There's absolutely nothing that we can do to the things that we cannot control. So I only focus on the things that I can control, bro. That's why I said I come from cause, not the effect.
Yep. Something that you mentioned in one of your stories about how you were evolving yourself and working on yourself, you mentioned that as a man, having relationships or a relationship with women or being good at doing so is a critical component. What's your relationship like with women today? And like, what's your philosophy, I guess, towards relationships with women?
Yeah, so my philosophy is a man is always going to be dependent on being the leader, right? And if he's not the current leader in his specific situation or in his specific relationship, then I do believe that to a degree he's being manipulated. That's my point of view, brother. And the reason why I think that is because me as a man, everything I do is to protect and provide for my people, right? And I understand that, like right now, for example, I'm single now. And the reason why I'm single, there is an intention behind it, is because I am now not so much pursuing, but attracting different experiences in my life, learning as much as possible from my interactions with women and allowing myself to become more valuable, right? Now, should I find a woman that you could say interests me to a high degree, then I wouldn't be opposed to making her, you could say, my girlfriend. However, right now, my main focus as being 25, focusing on my purpose, focusing on my vision, focusing on my mission is that I'm on my purpose, I'm on my mission, I'm working on becoming the best version of myself, and I'm going to allow that to happen. I am not going to be a guy that's going to put a woman in the center of his universe and then become distracted just to cater to this female and then lose everything that I have and get lost in the sauce, you can say, or get lost in the softness of a woman, because it does feel really great when you have a woman that loves you and you have a woman that likes you and you have a woman that, is submissive and wants to be around. However, at the same time, as a man, you have to be disciplined to pursuing your mission and to be on your purpose at all times. So right now, as a 25-year-old man, brother, that's what my relationship with the world, with women, with my purpose looks like. I do still go out. I still am social. I am dating women. And that's as far as I'm taking it for now. So that's my lifestyle. That's how I live. And I like it.
So it's kind of that reinforcing of the dichotomy that you could be a man on your shit and progressing, or you could be pursuing a more in-depth relationship with a woman. Can you have it all, you think?
I think you can. I think you can have it all. And I believe that there's a specific point where there's a lot of variables to that question, a lot of variables to that question. And I believe in my philosophy is there's going to be a point where is going to be a lot effortless for you to be able to run a specific relationship or relationships, right? When your purpose is also being fulfilled and you have the proper systems in your life to be able to run these relationships and experience these relationships in complete harmony with everything else that makes you fulfilled as a man. So that's my point of view on that, bro.
So it's interesting, right? Because it's easy to say that, and then some people might say, well, when he meets the right woman, then he'll change his mind, and maybe he'll be married by next year with a Mrs. Jose Rodriguez. What happens if Mrs. Right comes walking your way next week?
No, bro, I don't have that way of thinking. That's not my mindset. Like that is not my frame. That you're basically telling me that I'm going to be manipulated by a woman that I'm not going to be able to say no to. And I just don't believe in that. I believe that I have a choice. You know what I mean? I believe that I have a choice. Even if she wants to be with me, I can say no. She could be the most attractive woman in the world, and I could still say no. Right? It has to align with my mission. It has to align with my purpose. And if it does not align with my mission, if it does not align with my purpose, I'm okay with walking away from it. And a lot of people aren't, because it is painful, especially if she's an attractive woman and you may even love this woman, right? However, if there is a specific point in your life where you have to say no, perhaps there's a discrepancy in belief systems or in principle or in a specific way of what the relationship should be like on both parties, and she doesn't want to be a part of what I'm doing, that's okay. I'm never going to be rude to a woman and say, oh, you're wrong for this, you're wrong for that. Listen, everybody's on their own journey. Everybody's on their own path. This is my path, and I will not be swayed by anybody. And that's it, bro. That's literally it. It's that simple. And I'll also say, because I was having a conversation with my friend actually yesterday about this specific topic. And, I had relationships as I was growing up, right? I've had girlfriends, all the way till now, being 25. And what I'll say is I learned a lot. And I noticed that there are certain men these days that are in a relationship. Let's say it's with their high school sweetheart. However, I'm not saying that everybody has a specific experience, but I'm seeing a lot of men that are in a relationship with their high school sweetheart, and they've been together for years, and they allow themselves to associate the quality of the relationship based on the length of the relationship. And I think that is incorrect. The quality of the relationship is based on the behavioral actions and the behavioral patterns of how you guys treat each other, right? And if you have a specific set of standards and a specific set of boundaries and principles, and this person, you could say your significant other is not necessarily respecting those boundaries, it's okay for you to go out into the world and allow yourself to be on that purpose and attract the right bees to the nest, you can say, or to the beehive, right? And that's just my perspective. But a lot of men have trouble doing that because, again, it's the comfort of feeling loved by this woman and being in this relationship and avoiding the pain of going out there and possibly being rejected, and possibly having to work on your game, possibly having to work on your fitness, on your physique, on how you look, on your communication, on everything else that you have to face when you look in the mirror that will ultimately make you more attractive, not just to women, but to life and to everybody around you. And a lot of people want to stay complacent in their relationships, and that's just not something that I'll ever be interested in doing.
Absolutely agree. And to be 100% clear, that wasn't me saying it. I'm just a mouthpiece. That was other people might say that, to be clear.
No, I understand, bro. Yeah.
It's interesting. It seemed like you avoided using the word soulmate in there. There was a moment where you sounded like you were leading up to it and then shied away from it. What's your thoughts on that concept?
No, yeah, I didn't feel like I was going to use that word, but what I believe is that all relationships are conditional, right? I do believe that all relationships are conditional. The only relationship that is, you can say, unconditional, right? Like unconditional love is the relationship that you possibly have with your parents, right? Perhaps with your mother, perhaps with your father, perhaps with your brother, perhaps with family. They may love you unconditionally. However, when you're in a relationship with a woman as a man, it's always going to be conditional, right? Think about it. How did you attract her in the first place? How did you attract her in the first place? And how were you attracted to her in the first place? There was specific subsets and specific qualities that you were looking for and that you liked about this woman. You judged her by those qualities, and she judged you by those qualities. Otherwise, she would date the first person that said hi to her, right? And hit on her. And same thing with you, right? So we all judge and we all have a specific set of qualities that we look for. Sorry, brother, I forgot the question.
Oh, that's all right. I mean, that was a good response, no matter what the question was, because it goes back to what we were talking about, even in the real estate conversation, of boundaries, of standards, and upholding them. Like you said, this concept of unconditional love is garbage. It's garbage, and it sets people up for failure, I think, in regards to relationships, marriages, long-term, short-term, whatever. The thought that love would be unconditional.
Right. So
Nonsense. That means you could go and, all right, there's no conditions. I'll beat the fuck out of you. You still love me. Like, that's not me saying that, of course.
right.
But you know what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense. Love is unconditional. All right, now you are a disgusting piece of shit human and you weren't before, but love's unconditional. I still love you. You're my soulmate. It doesn't make fucking sense. And this goes hand in hand with people tying to themselves with government contracts to each other. And it allows for so much of the slipping up and the complacency, like you were saying, and the people not being on their shit and not being and continuing to be good partners. When you have this construct that on the mental side, love is unconditional, I'll always be with you, and then you have the legal contract to back it up, I think it's why a lot of marriages and relationships are failing. You have to be on your shit. I think every relationship should operate with the parameters that if you stop doing this, and this, because this is what I expect in a partner, or at least bare minimum expect you not to do this, and this. And again, not that it has to be an autistic hard list that you go over and sit down and be at the table. Maybe that works for some types, but not me. It's like, I think there should just be that theme that love is conditional. And that's beautiful, because that means as time goes on, you are choosing to be with that person because they are meeting your conditions and you're meeting their conditions. And so you mutually agree that you're going to continue to be together. That's conditional.
100%, brother. The soulmate myth, and thinking about that, brother, it's a victim mentality. It is a victim mentality because it's a way of coping and giving yourself, you can say, or holding yourself off the hook and saying, oh, well, you know what? I got to make it work with this person, even if, they're not necessarily respecting my boundaries or vice versa. And like you said, brother, I mean, you put the nail in the coffin, man. There's going to be specific qualities and specific subsets that I'm going to respect from a woman. And if she doesn't meet those requirements, and if I don't meet those requirements as a man, she should be able to walk away. I should be able to walk away. So 100%, brother. And you know what, bro? It's funny because it's okay these days, right? In 2024, when a woman says it, oh, well, I want a man that, is 6'5" and makes, 7 figures and, is ripped and is doing this and is doing that and is celebrity or whatever. But then when a man says it, well, I want a woman that's, 5'4", 5'2", that has a slim waist, that has a, now when I start to judge a female, right? Oh, well, why are you body shaming? Oh, like you shouldn't talk like that. So I believe that these days there is a specific agenda and a specific narrative where men are being pressured to tolerate certain things that goes against their specific values and their specific principles for the sole purpose of being weaker and you can say being crippled to now no longer have the fight within them as a man and to be able to be more manipulatable, right? That the easiest way to manipulate a man is through a woman, right? And I see this happening in front of me where a lot of men are afraid of standing up for themselves and allowing themselves to be how they truly want to be as a man. And
absolutely, you've just opened up a can of worms that could fill an entire episode itself. But yes, certainly there have been societal conditioning and social engineering movements that have purported this overall construct that you're mentioning, that have trickled down to the way that everyday family units or relationship units or people as individuals have come to operate in their day-to-day life. And it's responsible for much of the detriment of society and chaos and disruption of society that we see today. People have this concept that patriarchy is bad and responsible for all the bad and evil things. And that's what we're living under. When in most relationships and most households, and even most organizations and institutions, I would say it's quite the opposite. We are operating under matriarchy at the actual level of society in most ways. And I don't think it works. I don't think it works. It's the old trope of, the that you see in TV. It's the reality of most households. You got the father who's just like the dumb, irrelevant character. You get the mother who's the one running the show and doing everything. And you get these men walking around saying bullshit like, oh, let me check with my wife. I got to make sure my wife likes this. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble. I'll be in the doghouse. Like, women are running society. And simultaneously, society isn't running very well. I'll let people connect the dots there. I'm not making any allegations, but yeah, that's a whole can of worms for another episode. Do you have any thoughts you want to share real quick on that?
Yeah, man. I mean, I agree with you. And what I'll say is in regards to women are running the show, what I could actually say about that is, in a way, I agree with part of that, but I also disagree with some of it. And what I disagree with in particular is that if there wasn't a specific man standing on the other side of the spectrum and actually reinforcing these values that we're seeing on Netflix, that we're seeing, on movies and TV shows, and even the certain things that are on in the radio, and certain things that you can say encourage, and then other things that they censor, right? There are specific men that are backing those values and that are backing those principles, because if there weren't, then it wouldn't be a reality, right? So to a very core point, and to state that point more clearly, it always goes back to the men, because the men have the responsibility to lead. Even when the women think that they're leading, it's always a man allowing them to lead. So
I agree 100%, and I'm so happy that you made that caveat, because it's not perhaps that women are running the show and want to run the show. It's that men are failing to run the show, which forces the women to try to step up, which is the natural inherent process. Femininity needs protecting. It needs masculinity to operate, even exist in this world. And when that masculinity doesn't come from an external figure, man, then the woman's natural, inherent biological, physiological, psychological procedures have her then form a masculinized outer shell that she can go and navigate the world within. So yes, I agree that it all falls back on the men. Women can only operate within the world that the men create or allow to be created. And yes, men have been failing women to a large degree for generations now. And that is why we see what we see today. And that's why we see the women that we see today, because the men have allowed the world to become this way. Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. So I do want to make sure that you make it to the next call that you mentioned you have. But in the closing couple minutes here, I want to talk about the Built from Pain network, right? Where did that come from? Why did you start that? And like, what kind of things does that network do today?
Yeah, so that was an inspiration that I received, and it happened actually back in 2019. The organization was formed in 2020. And when I received the inspiration, it was more about, well, I believe that I have this specific gift of being very being a leader, right? And operating from leadership, and being somebody that can have that gravity amongst other people, where I could pull them in and, ultimately help them and influence them to course correct their life, right? Because I've done that for myself. However, I wasn't necessarily 100% sure if I should or shouldn't do it. So the first thing that I did was I actually did a challenge, and it was called the SFSB challenge. And that stands for Strong Finish and Strong Beginning. So that was in December 2019, December 15th, 2019 to January 15th, 2019. And the whole idea between strong finish and strong beginning is usually people get lazy towards the end of the year, and then they have all these New Year's resolutions, and then maybe they start for the first, you could say, couple days, and then they drop off after 2 weeks, right? So it was more about, all right, well, I'm going to hold you accountable before the year ends, And after the year ends, we're going to hold each other accountable. And I had a specific set of habits that I would practice religiously every single day. And some of those habits I still keep around. And I wanted to see how other men performed under these habits. I wanted to see if my way of thinking and my way of being and my way of moving will improve the lives of these men. So that it started off with that challenge for 30 days straight. Every single day, everybody had to do a specific set of habits and routines that would better them in every aspect of life. The three pillars that we mainly speak about is health, relationships, and wealth, right? So during those 30 days, I saw a lot of men improving, giving me great feedback and wanted to continue doing the challenge. But I saw something bigger than just a challenge. I saw a community. I saw a community of strong men that wanted to get their lives in order, that wanted to become a role model for their people, that wanted to be an inspiring figure in the world, that ultimately wanted to be successful, was ambitious. And I saw that and I was like, you know what? Well, I do surround myself with certain people. However, there are certain people that I would go to for business, but I can't necessarily go for dating advice, right? Or there would be some people that I could go for dating advice and women in relationships, but I can't necessarily go for business, right? So I saw the Built from Pain movement. First and foremost, the name, even before I finish that, is Built from Pain. Right? Being built from pain, understanding that through your life, as you shed this ego, you are going to go through a certain level of suffering and a certain level of pain that is going to be required for you to tap into that best version of yourself. And it's okay, right? I wanted to be somebody that told the men that were a part of this community, I go through it too. Even with everything that you see myself having now, I still go through it because we're all looking to evolve. And also having that accountability, having that brotherhood, being able to embrace the pain that comes with the adversity that allows us to grow into men. I wanted everybody else to embrace it as well that was on a similar path, that thought similarly. So that's how the culture was created, right? And yeah, little by little, man, the movement continues to grow now. And a lot of men are doing well, right? We have 7-figure earners, 6-figure earners, people that are just starting. So from all walks of life, we have people that, maybe are just working on getting their first date. Maybe people that want to get a better physique, maybe want to think a certain way, maybe want to adapt certain habits, maybe want to hold themselves accountable, or perhaps want to be around that osmosis environment that allows them to, become better men, right? The 5 people that you surround yourself with are going to have a huge impact on your life. So it's about bringing that culture, allowing men to understand that we're here. And if you're seeking to improve your life in all metrics that you could possibly think of, that's the Built from Pain movement. That's what we're about.
That's beautiful because you are creating for people exactly what you feel was the strength that was beneath your wins on your ascent, right? That community, that ability to not have to feel alone, perhaps if you otherwise feel alone in life. That's a beautiful thing. And so where can people check out the Built from Pain Network? Where can people check out more Jose content? Where can people go to interact with you if they like what you said today?
Absolutely. So you can follow me on Instagram at jrod_845. If you want to check out the BFP website, it's going to be www.thebfpnetwork.com. And all the information should be there. Follow me on Instagram. That's where I post all my present stuff. And, shoot me a DM if you'd like, and we'll have a conversation.
Amazing. Amazing. And Jose, is there any final closing messages that you'd like to leave people off with? And you could do one general one. You can compartmentalize it if you wish, to men, one to women, one to real estate people or aspiring real estate people. Are there any just closing thoughts that you think are really important for someone to take away?
Yeah, brother. I would say be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? It's okay for you to have a specific adversity in your life currently today. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be dealing with that for the rest of your life. Be the kind of man that wakes up in the morning looking forward to these challenges, and be very analytical about them sometimes as well. And just jot these notes down. Look at your life, look at yourself, and even have bullet points every single day as to certain things that you can accomplish today that could even make you 1% better. Stop focusing so much on the bigger picture, you can say, and think that you'll never get there because it seems so far away. Instead, understand the bigger picture, reverse engineer, and focus on the current step that's in front of you, because that current step that's in front of you is much more vital and much more important. And just take it step by step. those days that you have where you feel like shit and you don't want to get up, I have those days too. But the difference of what got me here and what kept other people in their complacent situation is that every day I chose to take action regardless of how I felt, because it was the discipline to be able to meet that future self, be able to look back and be genuinely proud about all the accomplishments and all the things that I did.
Beautiful. Jose, thank you very much for coming on the show, brother.
Thank you for having me, Zach. You've been a great host, and I look forward to being here and reuniting with you and having another conversation about some very important topics very soon.
Till next time, brother.
Till next time.